Happy Monday, everyone. December 13th. We're on the Common Good podcast. And on Mondays, we talk about common good news. It's not always good news, but it's common good news. We're going to start with a little good news today, actually. And then some, really tragic bad news. And then some future, possibly horrible news. And then some crazy business news. But all of it mixed together with a little faith, hope, and love, we hope. Doug Pagitt here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Daniel Deitrich coming out of a little music studio there in South Bend, Indiana. Hey, Dan, I've watched a couple documentaries the last couple of days. One of them about your former mayor.
Oh, did you watch that one?
Yeah, Mayor Pete.
Mayor Pete. It's a great little doc.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. How do you think it treated the hometown there?
I think it did okay. Yeah. I think it was a pretty good representation. I think they were like the one scene where they're right in the middle of like debate prep and there's this officer involved shooting here in South Bend, and Pete decides to like go back home to South Bend and just take the heat. It was pretty brutally honest, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, I did too. I thought that really that was a good way to show sort of what goes on and how difficult it is for someone to do another job while they're trying to get another job in addition to other things.
Yeah.
Which one of my beefs about people running for office is that very, very rarely do you get to use your current job time to try to get another job. But people do it in politics all the time. It's a very curious thing that I guess you kind of ask permission. I mean, he was not going to seek re-election as mayor, but I guess did he kind of ask the people of South Bend, Indiana, if he could be running for another job?
He did not ask me personally, and I'm still upset about that. So
yeah, you should. You think in a town like that, you could just sort of ask around, see what people think. Hey, how did things turn out in that officer-involved shooting? Do you recall? Have you kept up on the details of that one?
Not as well as people would have liked. The officer doesn't work here anymore.
Yeah. But
it's like
always
and really it's Pete took a lot of heat for it, but a lot of it is out of his hands. Like it's not up to him who gets fired from the police department. He literally cannot, because of the contracts put in place by police unions. But there were systemic changes that could have been led by the mayor's office that just didn't happen. So.
Didn't happen. Yeah, as he put it in the debate when he was asked about it, he didn't get it done. He didn't get that part of the job done. It was a good response. I remember hearing it at the time. And anyway, so that was a poignant documentary to watch, that one. And then at your recommendation, and because of another little news story I heard, I did delve into the Beatles Get Back documentary.
Yeah,
put together by Peter Jackson, who is famous for making very long and, in my opinion, very boring movies, like the
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, unbelievable yawners to me.
Well, I'm gonna have to fight you.
Oh, really? Okay.
I go extended edition all day long.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. You're a true Peter Jackson film believer, including this one. You had said last Friday, hey, are you a Beatles fan? You should watch this documentary. And I'd said, no, I'm not really a Beatles fan. I mean, I like their music. Of course, their influences on you can't overstate the gratefulness for them for creating a genre of music that 40 years has lived in the 50 years has lived in the wake of course. Terrific on that in that sense. But I wasn't really a Beatles fan per se. But I watched episode 1 of 3 episodes last night, 2.5 hours on this thing. And it's the setting is January of 1969. They're going to make an album that turns out to be the album Let It Be. And the idea is that they're making a documentary about writing this album, but they have to write the album in 2 weeks because they're going to launch it with a live television show that is the recording of the album.
Yeah.
So they start on January 2nd and they tick-tock through the days. So the footage that they're using is footage from the original documentary, which I think did come out in 1970 or so, telling the story of that. But they used all this back footage and audio, and with current technologies, we're able to blend all that together in some ways that really got you inside the experience. And I will say, I may not be a Beatles fan, but I have a crush on Paul McCartney like it's nobody's business. What
Yeah.
all of them. Just, I mean, I know I'm going to come around on George Harrison. At this point, I'm like, boy, that guy's got some stuff he's working on. But he's 29 years old and he's been a Beatle for 10, 11, 12 years, whatever, 14 years, whatever it's been by this point. And these guys are young men, and it is stunning. It is genius in the making. The film itself is, I think, an incredible way that they put this together. But watching them write these songs
Yeah.
and navigate all the stuff that is going on for them in their final year, what turns out to be their final year of being a band as the Beatles, just sitting in this room and a film crew around, but them just doing what they do, making this music is
Yeah, just fascinating.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll just be like, they just start to wander in to the studio for the day and sit down at their instruments, kind of messing around. And Paul McCartney, you can hear him start to fumble around with this little idea that becomes Get Back in a matter of minutes. Just like creating from nothing this massive hit, and you see it start to take shape, and it's so great.
So great. And so many songs, a bunch of songs that end up on Abbey Road are started right there in these, and the pressure is on after because they show a calendar January 2nd, and they have 2 weeks to get this thing ready to go live. And like they spend the first they start on like a Thursday or something, Thursday and Friday they work, or maybe just Friday, take Saturday and Sunday off. They only have 14 days and they take 2 of them off.
Yeah, they take the weekends off.
They take the weekends off because they're the friggin' Beatles. And the dynamic between them, watching John, I'll tell you, I also became a huge admirer of the John Lennon tone and attitude. I'd always kind of thought of John Lennon as a bit more, I don't know, a bit more standoffish and a bit more the legend of John Lennon, I don't know, like somehow sort of above it all. But man, he is just such a sweet spirit and humble guy and just jokey fun. And
yeah, it's fun to see him just like joking around and being silly. Like they're really still just kids at this point, They're like mid-20s, just joking around and
yeah. Well, I mean, of course, like maybe other people did too. I was like, okay, hang on a minute. Hey Siri, when was Paul McCartney born? When was John Lennon born? Right? I'm like, okay, one's 27, one's 28. I think maybe George Harrison was 29. They have a little bit in there where they reference that it's Elvis's birthday and Elvis was 34. And, they're like the old man, the king.
yeah.
And, when you're in your mid-20s, somebody in their 30s does feel older than you. And but just amazing, all of it. And the dynamics, like the serious family dynamics going on where each one of them is playing a role in this family group that they've put together. Clearly, Paul McCartney is the leader of this band. Like,
yeah, he's the one getting things done and bringing songs to the table.
Yeah, bringing songs, or people would come up and say, there's one scene, this isn't a spoiler. I mean, you can't spoil this thing. I could re-describe every moment of it and you'd still watch it and have tears in your eyes. It's that good. But there's one scene where where John Lennon has some lyric sheets hanging over one of his microphones. And the sound person comes up to Paul McCartney, whispers in Paul McCartney's ear. Then Paul McCartney says to John Lennon, hey, they can't hear because you got that thing hanging over your microphone. So he moved it off. Like the guy didn't go to John Lennon. He went to Paul McCartney. And you watch all these little decisions, like the hierarchy of how it all comes out, and George Harrison's frustration with the whole thing. And,
yeah.
It just... All right. So the other thing I thought was fascinating is these guys are the Beatles in 1969. So they've already reached a level of, well, to use a phrase, they're more famous than Jesus right at this point.
Yeah.
They are so incredibly famous, but they're arguing with the record company. Like they can't get good microphones. And they're like, I know for sure that the Beach Boys have an 8-track recorder that they've got over there. How come we can't have one? Like they're having to bicker with their recording company, which I thought for every struggling musician or anybody in anywhere that you work with a publisher or a record company or anything like that. You feel like it's just really hanging there. Hey, good point. Roger Flyer reminds me that George Harrison is younger. He is 26, not the older one, 29.
And just Ringo hanging out, like he's just
Not
the
saying
most
a word.
cheerful, down for anything guy, just sitting there.
Just the Enneagram 9 sitting back on the drums, like I am not getting involved in this little tussle that's going on with the lads. Just sitting above it and out of it, watching it all happen, smiling. And you hear other people saying things like, "I really like Ringo. He's just the kindest heart of them all." You know? And remember the argument between where Paul McCartney is arguing is not arguing. He's saying to George Harrison, "I feel like I'm having to always argue with you, and." About how we're going to do this. And George Harrison isn't saying you're always arguing with me. Paul McCartney is having to be like, I think you think I'm always arguing with you. John agrees with me, but he won't say anything. And John's like, yeah, I'm not saying anything. And Ringo's just sitting up there like, oh, I'm staying out of this. That dynamic, but so pleasant. I don't know. I know that, it's a big cliffhanger at the end, a lot of frustration, and the band ends up not staying together. But the level of kindness that is demonstrated in that room, and maybe it's only because they're filming it, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels like this is just how they behave.
Like they're working out some issues, but pretty cordially. Like
unbelievable.
Not yelling at each other, not throwing things.
Even when the big cliffhanger, when George Harrison says what he says, he just like, okay, that's it. I'm just, I'm going now. I'll see you around. Like not even. So I don't know if these guys, if maybe all of our English listeners and friends can tell us about this, but maybe they're just like, oh, that is classic English, regression. Like they're just stuffing it down and it all comes out later.
Like level 10 rage for a British person. But.
Yes, that's right. And the other thing Shelley noticed, which she has a really great ear for this kind of thing. She said, there's no swearing. There's no F words at all.
Oh, they'll get around to a few, but
I watched
not at
2.5
each other,
hours and 6 days of them working on this stuff in the heart of it. And there is, I mean, you couldn't hang around, a Vote Common Good event with a camera running without having to. So it tells me not only them personally, but just how much culture has changed and shifted. I'm guessing, that like that kind of. Not vulgarity, I don't mean it that way, but just kind of swearing and crassness that is so common now. And maybe it was even common with other bands. It's just not there at all. There is something in the simple dynamics of all this that I found just so incredible. And what it did for me is when Shelley and I were talking about these songs, and she's like, yeah, I know some Beatles songs. I don't know that I like them. She doesn't like their drug music phase, that sort of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, I'm a Walrus, and, all this. She didn't like that stuff. This is not her style and tone. But then there are all these other songs. She's like, oh yeah, I really like. But I realized as we were talking about the music, because of our age, like I was born in 66, she was born in 65. So by the time we run into Beatles music, they've broken up, they're done. They're already the Beatles, and their music is legendary and it's complete. What you see in this documentary is the living expression of all of this stuff, the dynamics, the band, the band man, the manager of the thing, and the other people chiming in, and you just see that just like everything else in the world, this was made up and created by a group of people in a room somewhere. It has no magic stardust on it other than the genius of these people, and it was created just the way everything else was. And it was very heartening to me and emotional for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, just hearing these songs and watching them and thinking Paul McCartney doesn't yet know what words are going to be in Let It Be.
Right.
He's got Mother Mary, and he's doing this, and like da da da, and John Lennon's like, maybe some words would make it a better song. Like they are dogging him while he's writing Let It Be at a piano with a bunch of people around, and they're teasing him because he doesn't have the words yet. And he just, for all of us who have so many things in our lives, relationships, work, output, whatever, that's unfinished, and it's so easy to feel the pressure and critique in the midst of something. Those moments I thought were just truly a gift, and really,
Yeah. So great.
really
Yeah,
great.
they're sitting around. People are arguing about what they're going to do with this live TV
Mhm.
show. Are we going to do it in Africa? Are we going to do it in England? Meanwhile, Paul McCartney is figuring out "Let It Be" and literally writing it and chiming in. Everyone, I'd rather not go to Africa.
Yeah, that's right. A guy interrupting him, the he's like, and the guy's like, so what do you think about where we should go? And he stops and he has to answer this
Yeah,
this tactical question and then gets back into it. And the way they're layering, so you're watching the documentary and it's Monday, so it's Friday, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is this incredible day where so much stuff, I'm probably ruining it for people now, but so much stuff starts to happen, right? And they don't know that Thursday's coming. So they're working on multiple songs at a time.
mm-hmm.
It's not like they're sitting down and writing a song and finishing it and then moving on to the next one. They are they are layering through these and kind of adding a line and jumping back and forth, and then
And they'll get stuck on one and move on to another song.
And these aren't just like your average songs. These are songs that have lasted have passed the test of time and are
Right.
incredible. So anyway, there's something more to me and feels newsy about this Beatles, this insight into this thing that was happening 52 years ago. I guess it'll be 53 years in a couple of weeks. So yeah, I am
You're a Beatles fan now. I told you
I
would
am,
become
I am
one.
a,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, I'm not trying to not be a Beatles fan. I'm glad to be a Beatles fan. I am a fan of these people at this stage. I have no idea what they were like when they were 21 or 22. I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
this stage of this thing, and on these days when they clearly haven't seen each other, and just how the grace at which they have managed all the pressures that are on them. I mean, Linda McCartney is in the room and Yoko Ono is in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the things. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, I just,
Roger in the chat says, "This made my day. Thank you." The others hated Maxwell's Silverhammer. Did you get to the point where they pull out an anvil, like a literal giant iron anvil, so they can make the hammer noise?
Yeah, so they can make the hammering sound. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, that's what you're worried about, is you can't quite get the right anvil sound? Like, you're in an empty room.
We got to dial this in, get the perfect
It's amazing
hammer sound.
So I just found it to be such an encouragement for anyone in the creative process. And I would add, everyone's in the creative process. We're all making our lives. We're making dinner. We're making love. We're making goodness. We're doing whatever we're doing. We're making it. And this is just a little window into one way that some things get made. And it is incredible. Yeah. Nadine says that watching Yoko was interesting. So interesting, like trying to read through the body language, and she's always right there with John Lennon, and he's just
it's fascinating.
I might go watch that first 2.5 hours again. I might just watch the first one again, because I don't know what's coming in episode 2 of 3, so I don't want to ruin it. All right, so clearing breath there on how good that was. Sort of on the other side of the news, these tornadoes that have struck the 6 or 7 states, including Kentucky. Boy, the same goodness that brought about, Let It Be in Abbey Road needs to come into towns like this, and do that kind of magic to make goodness for people again. Because when natural disasters strike like this is why we need responses that get above individual people doing individual things. Like that town, these towns that were so devastated, they weren't created by any single person or company or business or sector. They were created by all the pieces coming together, and it's going to take all the pieces to build it back, and hopefully to even coin a phrase, build it back better, and to remake these towns. But Dan, you have a little personal connection to this.
Yeah, on the screen is a picture, I believe, from Mayfield, Kentucky, and this is my wife's hometown. This is where we spend Thanksgivings, and where she grew up, where her family still lives, and her family is safe thankfully, damage to their homes and roofs. And her uncle's store was downtown, which was just flattened. There's nothing left of his store. It looks like a World War II, like bombed out city. It's just unrecognizable. And this was a small town. It's like a town of 10,000 people, and just the whole town is devastated. It's really wild to see these images, and yeah.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking, and you really do want to have all the care and empathy in the world, and just to pour onto people whose lives become devastated like this everything that they need. Insurance companies. Not everyone is insured in the same way. We were sort of chatting. I was joking at the start of it that there's days where I think, if somebody came to me and offered me X amount of dollars for my house and all the stuff in it, I might take that deal, right? There's days where I kind of feel that way. Like, I don't know if I really need all this stuff and kind of want it. And so some people will end up sort of financially fine, but a lot of people, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah.
A lot of renters don't have insurance. A lot of homeowners are underinsured or
Right.
haven't been paid up. There's just things that happen to people. And
this tornado went right through probably the poorest part of town, a part that was already hurting, and just leveled it. There's nothing left. There's just slabs. Most of these houses don't have basements, and so it's just like there's nothing left, just sticks and debris like you see on this image.
Yeah,
and so
it's
these
incredible.
people were hurting already, and to be hit like this. And I don't know if you heard about the candle factory. There's a factory in town. There's 100 people working the night shift at a candle factory, that's a whole different conversation as to
Kind
why
of burning
that's.
it on both ends.
I see what you did there.
See what I did there? Too soon for a candle burning joke. Pardon me.
But the factory collapsed, and again, these are low wage workers. These are
Yeah.
And from one of my friends in the town, he said this factory is known for treating their employees poorly, for paying them poorly, and for creating a really bad work environment to begin with. And then you have this happen where dozens of workers were killed when this building collapsed. It's just hard to imagine coming back from this.
Today that they're now saying that they had feared, because they couldn't reach a whole lot of people, that a lot of workers had died in the building, and they're now suspecting that may not be the case, but they didn't know where they were because they couldn't find them, because they couldn't go to their homes, because then their homes were destroyed. So their work is destroyed, their homes are destroyed, they're terrified. I mean, a lot of people in these towns thought they were going to die because people were dying. Like, this was, so the trauma that sets in on you.
Yeah.
And just how fearful you are, and you're running for your life. The last thing you're thinking about is, reporting to your boss or somebody else that you're okay.
Right.
So the numbers are now also really confusing people about how many have died and how many are still should be searched for. So there's all of that work that has to go on, and it's going to really take a lot to get to have our response be what our response needs to be.
Yeah. And Nadine in the chat is asking any insight on the best charity to give to help. A couple other people in the chat are asking, how can we help? I'm still kind of looking around and researching the best way to do that. So we'll probably push out on social media or this show when one of these nonprofits or organizations kind of rises to the top. In the early days, we've looked around and there's a bunch of GoFundMes from random people, and I'm kind of waiting to see which is legit and which is going to be the most helpful.
Yeah, I will say, look, the Red Cross is always top notch. They're going to be there. They're going to stay. They're going to do a lot. The Red Cross will be there to help with current needs, and they need help in helping. And then all of the religious groups that have relief efforts they will all be there. All the brand name religious groups, the denominational groups, all the rest, they will be there. So if you have a current connection to a religious group or a denomination or something, the Methodists or the Baptists or the Episcopalians, they all have a relief arm. They will all be coming into, whether it's each individual town, they tend to divide that stuff up by their own sense of connection to those towns. But because this isn't just one town that was hit,
Yeah.
there were dozens of them
Mm-hmm.
that have been hit. I mean, this was a terrible, terrible storm. So if you don't know who else to go to, one of the ways is to find these the relief arm of these religious groups. And I can assure you that even the most even the relief groups or the religious groups that you wouldn't agree with religiously on stuff like this, they tend to just come in and provide water and care and housing and support and
Mm-hmm.
food and counseling and emergency packs, and they do all that stuff. So if you want to get down to Kentucky or Tennessee or the other places that have been hit by this, they're always looking for volunteers as well. So you can reach out to any of those sort of groups, and in my opinion, those groups are trustworthy. You can count on the money you give to them. The money is going to go to this work. Or if you wanted to volunteer to go and help and to be there to give care, you could reach out to one of those groups, and they'd be glad to take your time and energy and whatever else you have. So if you have a skill, like a lot of people are nurses or trades workers, and they're like, yeah, I want to come down and sort of help, or I have a truck or a trailer. Like sometimes people are just like, we just need that stuff. I just need to clear things out. There's groups that can help you coordinate some of that stuff. Sometimes religion is not very good in the world. It tends to get a little binary. And sometimes it does really good things. And when it comes to disaster response work, a lot of the big denominations that have big efforts in these places, they've actually figured out how to do that fairly well in the short run. They're not good for rebuilding a town,
Right.
You're not going to rebuild the infrastructure of a town with charitable contributions. Like that's going to become state, city, and federal, mostly federal dollars that are going to do that. But I would advise somebody to take a look at those groups, and a lot of ways to find them.
Yeah.
I happen to think that I don't have any personal or religious connection to the Methodists nor the Episcopalians or the Presbyterians, but those three groups tend to do this stuff really pretty well. So their national relief efforts could be people you might look at.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of people who I would say don't look at on this one, I would say Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. He immediately sent a letter to Joe Biden asking for Joe Biden to release federal funds, which Joe Biden had already done, to release federal funds to help his state, as he should do. That's exactly what a senator ought to do. The thing is that this same Rand Paul, back in 2017, when Puerto Rico and Florida and Texas were hit by hurricanes that devastated thousands and thousands of people, he did not want federal dollars going to those places. Here's a little clip of him in 2017 talking about why he thinks the money shouldn't go to those places. Oh, yes, and the loot.
So people here will say they have great compassion and they want to help the people of Puerto Rico and the people of Texas and the people of Florida. But notice they have great compassion with someone else's money. Ask them if they're giving any money to Puerto Rico. Ask them if they're giving money to Texas. Ask them what they're doing to help their fellow man. And you'll find often that it's easy to be compassionate with someone else's money.
So there's Rand Paul trying to make the argument that people saying that the federal government should help is doing it with other people's money. Okay, first of all, federal dollars that are ever spent anywhere on anything is not other people's money. It's
literally our money.
If you need to bone up on this, go back in our podcast, listen to our Fridays in Economics with Professor Fadl, and we'll talk about the fact that all government spending, every single dime, does not come from your bank account, nor from my bank account, nor from anyone's bank account. It comes out of the United States Treasury. It's budgeted and comes from the Treasury. All the money you pay in federal dollars to taxes just goes away, and all the money comes out. What they do in your taxes is to incentivize you to certain behaviors and to control for inflation. So they put money in through the federal government, take money out through taxes. It's not like state dollars, county dollars, city dollars. So for Rand Paul, whose job it is to help manage the distribution of federal dollars, it's not other people's money. Taking his larger point at hand, though, what he's trying to say is these are people who don't do it themselves. Well, Senator Paul, I think you see the world as you are, not as it is. I don't want to ask for you to show your deductible, tax records, but there are people who actually do a lot in situations like this. And the people calling for the federal government to respond in doing good things are also doing good things. So if your curmudgeony, miserly little way of saying that you and all the people you hang around with in your $1 million houses don't actually give any money to these causes, please don't suspect that that's true of the rest of the people in this country, in this world. You actually look at the amount of money that goes in and the people who support this. Come on, this is just unbelievable. And these are the kinds of situations that the federal government alone can respond to. The reason we have a federal government and not a series of independent states is to respond to moments just like this. This is why.
Too big for a single state to respond to.
Just it's pretend for a minute that it's war money spending. How does that make you feel? Is it good? You're gonna pay for the Pentagon? And I know he's got his own views on the Pentagon. He doesn't want to spend any money. This guy, it's too big for any state, for any city. But this is why we're a country for the love is to do stuff like this. Now, in this case, he's asking for the money. Back in 2017, he was trying to give a bunch of warnings about not spending the money on these things. And he also didn't vote to send money to New York for Hurricane Sandy, which almost destroyed whole sectors of a state's economy. Nope, I'm going to vote no on that. Yeah. But now I'm going to vote yes on Kentucky. Well, at least the man cares about his own constituents, so that when time comes for people in Kentucky, he comes to his senses and does the right thing. He won't do the right thing for somebody else, but he'll do the right thing for his own constituents. So you get a half a check mark on that one.
Yeah. It's frustrating. These hardcore libertarians, they want all the benefits of a functional, well-funded federal government when it comes to their needs, but they also want this, I'm not on the hook for any of it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing about the libertarians in my life. I want to be a person of goodness and charity and tolerance. And then I'm around libertarians and I just can't, I lose myself and I feel badly about how I think and feel. So I don't want to be that way. And I've been working on it for about 35 years, but, this libertarian attitude, of which Rand Paul is one of the chief architects and advocates for it, but a lot of people buy into it. They are profoundly unclear on a regular basis about what exactly they think you should spend money on.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's just nothing. Maybe that would be the way. Maybe any money spent on the government means that the government then has power to take your liberty. Because libertarians' primary concern is that you're not restricted by the behavior of the federal government, that it stay completely out of the way. When you hear them, and they'll often say, well, I think some basic functioning of the government should happen, maybe some common defense, there's a little preamble of the Constitution stuff. But then you ask them, like, well, how much are we spending enough money or too much money on those causes? They'll always tell you that we're spending too much on those. Yeah. Like, even the things they want to chip in on, you're overspending. And it's not that and this is the thing that gets me about them. It's not that they say that the thing shouldn't be paid for. Rand Paul goes on in that bit and says, sure, this is stuff we should pay for, but this should be being done by private industry. This should be being done by states and county governments. This should be being done locally. This is always the answer. I'm not saying, I'll get on my libertarian rant. Libertarian saying, I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I'm not saying the money shouldn't be spent. I'm just saying it shouldn't be the federal government. Mm-hmm. This thing that you hear from lots of conservatives, certainly from libertarians, about a lot of things where it's like, hey, I'm not opposed to it. Vaccines, I'm not opposed to a mandate. I just don't think the federal government should give it. And then you say, well, who do you think should do it? Whether it's a vaccine mandate or spending money or having rules about whatever. Then they'll say, well, the state. But then you talk to the state the libertarians who talk about their state, of Indiana or Kentucky or Minnesota.
Well, it should be up to the local government.
They'll say, well, the state, what does the state governor know about this? He shouldn't do it. She shouldn't do it. Governor Whitmer doesn't have the right. This should be done
Yeah.
at a local level. And then you get down to the city level and they're like, my city manager has no right. And then, you get down to your local neighborhood level. At no point do they say like, as a libertarian,
This is
I'll
the
just say, of course,
appropriate-
the
yeah.
federal government shouldn't do it. The state government should spend $1 billion on this. There's no point at which they say that there's enough money being spent, the right amount of money being spent, or we know who should make these decisions. So it's a philosophy that continues to entangle our nation. And this will happen in Kentucky. I promise you, it happened in every natural disaster. A bunch of money is promised, a bunch of help is given initially,
Yeah.
then things go quiet, then it dries up, and pretty soon there's people living in FEMA trailers for 36 months.
Right.
Because
the next
all the attention
disaster
is gone.
happens and the public consciousness moves on to the next big event, and little towns like Mayfield are forgotten about.
And some libertarian is running the show and says, I'm sorry, we've done all we can do. Can't help.
Go ask a
And
church.
oftentimes these go ask a church. Yeah. Take again the responsibility that should be on our federal government and dump it onto a small nonprofit. Great idea. And in a lot of these small towns, they've been infected by this kind of thinking. No big government spending until this happens, and then you
Right.
sure as shooting want a big government response. You want those FEMA trailers rolling in. I mean, it's as much as I was just bragging about what the Lutherans and Methodists and Presbyterians and Red Cross and the Crescent Moon and all these groups do. They can't come close to
Right.
buying you a trailer to live in for the next year. They're not going to relocate you to another city and pay for a house. Like, do you know how much money that costs? The only people that can afford that are the people that run the United States Treasury. You can't house 10,000 people who need to keep working and going to school and have lives. You can't just do that with charitable contributions where everybody else chips in 10%. You have to have the ability to create the dollars necessary to do it, which is why we have a Federal Reserve. As if we're getting ahead of ourselves on a Friday conversation about all this. So anyway, if that's all new to you and you're saying to yourself, Doug is talking fast and rambling and babbling about things I don't understand, go back and listen to some of our podcasts or our live streams, and maybe we should pop some of those in the places where people can find those where we talk about this, because it's a Copernican-like revolution in your mind, where the realization was that the Earth is not the center of the universe, but the Earth revolves around the sun. That level of flip, once you realize, the federal government doesn't use individual tax dollars as its income. It produces the money out of the Treasury. That flip of a switch, I promise you, it will open whole new horizons for understanding what's been going on the whole time anyway. People have been tricking you and saying that you send money to the government, they stick it in a bank account, and then when the time comes, they spend it. If they don't have enough money in their bank account, then they have to go borrow it from someone. And we call that deficit. That's not what the deficit is. The deficit is the difference between the amount of money spent and the amount of money taxed, not the amount of money that we borrowed.
And we'll always have a deficit because there's money in the economy. Like we'll never tax all the money and get it back in the Treasury.
Because there's no point, because the money doesn't go into the Treasury. The money comes out of the economy. Again, this is the part that I've talked to this, dozens of people who just stare with that tilted, look of a dog's tilted head, which now apparently scientists know what that's about. I saw that news story the other day. They now know why dogs tilt their heads. But people do this thing that all mammals tend to do apparently, and tilt their heads when they say, "What do you mean the money doesn't go into the Treasury? We don't pay into the Treasury." Yeah, you don't pay into the Treasury. When you pay your federal taxes, only federal dollars, not state, city, your federal dollars are removed from the economy when you pay it in taxes. The federal Treasury doesn't keep a bank account that they deposit your money into. No. Hang on. Where's that? There we go.
That's why that sound effect
thing here. That's why it's here. I even said earlier, why would we have the space sound effect? Well, this is why. That's not what happens with the money. The money is removed from the economy. It's important that money is removed from the economy because it's how we stimulate the economy. You're taking some money out and putting new money in, and when the new money goes in, it goes into places different than where it was in when it was in your bank account.
And it's a
So this
valve
is
that can
part of-
regulate things like inflation.
That's why all this talk about how much money we're going to spend on the Build Back Better plan or on the infrastructure or on the COVID dollars that were spent. Now everybody's worried about inflation, because if the federal government puts too much money in the economy and everybody has too much money, then the issues of supply and demand kick in, and demand goes up because you can buy it now because you have more money. And when there's more money than there is supply, then prices go up. So what they're trying to do, and we've got a little double whammy going on right now. We infused $1 trillion in over COVID period of time. Like all the money from the infrastructure, but that's not being spent into the economy yet. But the money from COVID is in the economy, or the money from the child tax credit is going into people's bank accounts. If you have children, like you have more money. Now people are trying to spend it, but the supply chain issues have caused demand. And so my daughter was going to get a couple of light bulbs, smart light bulbs that go with her Alexa, so she can say, Alexa, turn on the lights, in her kid's bedroom. They are normally like $20 for a pack. They're $70 a pack right now. Now that's a temporary spike because they just don't have a lot of them. So they're just raising that. There's an algorithm that just raises the price on Amazon, right? And they get crazy expensive. So that's what you don't want. The reason we tax is because we're going to spend new money, because you can't just trust that everyone's going to just circulate their money into the right place. Like when the state wants to build a highway and federal dollars go into it, the money has to go into the state bank account to be able to pay for that highway.
Yeah.
That's what the federal government does. When the federal government takes your money out in taxes, this is not the same for, well, technically it is even the same for your Social Security money. They're just keeping track of it on a ledger. But the money is paid into the government and then just goes away. And people often say, like, what do you mean it goes away? It's no longer counted as being in the economy. That's what it means. They're not spending those dollars anymore. They have a separate budget of expenditures and a separate budget of taking money out of the economy. How much are we going to take out as taxes and fees? How much are we going to spend? Comes out of the Treasury. Two separate containers, where your mine and your bank accounts are one container. The money goes in a direct deposit or a check, and then the money goes out to someone else, and it's all in the same container.
Yeah, and there's no longer a pile of gold at Fort Knox that we have to balance against.
That's right.
The deficit. Yeah,
we now have what the economists call a fiat currency, meaning it's a standalone. It dictates the rules of its own currency, and it's not just the U.S. government. Every government that has its own currency is the same way. This is why some currencies can have crazy high inflation and get out of control and having a collapsing economy, because they put too much money into their economy, and there wasn't enough money flowing through the economy and working through the economy. So anyway, that's how all that stuff works. We'll talk about all that a whole lot more. But boy, there was an unexpected little lesson cued on by Rand Paul's libertarian prompt. Cleansing breath on that one. Yeah. Hey, let's talk about the January 6th plot.
Yeah, let's bring our blood pressure down and talk about...
And just talk about the end of our democracy. If we were going to continue to have a democracy, we know how it would be funded by the Federal Reserve. But since we're not going to have one, because the January 6th attackers are going to do it again and are apparently in no trouble for having done it the first time. I mean, a couple of individuals, low-level, thugs on the street are going to go to jail for a while. But the people that were behind it, plotting it, planning it, scheming it, wanting it, calling for it,
making PowerPoint presentations for it,
which should be a jailable crime in and of itself. Put together a PowerPoint. Somebody had to sit through that thing. Somebody got in the room, couldn't get the projector big enough to far enough back to fill the whole screen, so it was only on part of the screen. The room lights weren't dim enough, and they couldn't figure out how to close the shades.
I love thinking about it as like one of these Four Seasons landscaping moments where they're trying to get the power. Now, which cord goes into the projector? Like,
did somebody bring an HDMI? I only got a Mac. I need an adapter. Why aren't these things Bluetooth?
They're not using
what we're battling
Macs.
about here,
They're Google
if you don't
people.
know, is that when the Stop the Steal and the whole idea that the election was rigged, started on Inauguration Day in 2017 with Trump, who immediately started to say the 2020 election is rigged. I think he literally said it the first day, and then said it nonstop, all the way up to the election, and found different reasons to say that the election was rigged because he was pretty sure he wasn't going to pull an inside straight twice in a row. So he had been working for 4 years to say that our elections are unfair and unsafe, and if he were to lose, and then when it became even more clear that things were not going his way before the election, he was ginning up all this. The elections are unfair, COVID, extension of voting times and voting styles is all creating a unfair advantage, and why that was only unfair for against him and for people voting for Joe Biden is still unclear. The same rules apply to both people, even if rules were adjusted because of a pandemic. Why that benefited one group over the other, still a little unclear, unless the idea is more people voting means that more people are not going to vote for me, which seems to be a whole other problem than this problem with the voting. But all that then led to the election, as we all know, and then Trump never conceding and saying that the election was fraudulent, and all the way up to through the big lie, which then brought people into January 6th to try to stop the certification of the electors from the Electoral College, which, a civics class reminder, is who actually elects the president. Are the states sending electors, and individual citizens in the state vote in such a way as to determine who the electors are. So that's how our Electoral College works for the president and vice presidency. So they want to stop Mike Pence from certifying those electors, casting their votes for Joe Biden in enough numbers that Joe Biden was going to be, then inaugurated as the president of the United States on January 20th. So that's the thing that happened. And they were putting together many, many options for what you could do to try to make Mike Pence not certify that election. So that's what this was all about. Some of it was to pressure and bully Mike Pence. Some of it was to create public opinion and raise a bunch of money in the greatest grift of election false fraud in American history, which is what the Trump campaign essentially was and still is. But it was a lot of things. But apparently they've now, the committee, the January 6th committee has their hands on, and reporters have gotten their hands on a version of a PowerPoint that was delivered to the president via his own chief of staff, Mark Meadows. And this thing was circulated and presented around, and people have their hands on it. And a retired U.S. Army colonel is the one who's behind this whole thing. Just once again, reminding us that just because someone was in the military doesn't mean they're necessarily going to have the greatest admiration for our Constitution.
Yeah.
So, were you going to say something there, Dan?
Nope.
Okay.
Just active listening, Doug.
Two of the slides on from that presentation are here on your screen, and those who are just listening, I'll show you what they are. A white background, blue header with black ink in the blue header. Not to pause and critique the layout of a PowerPoint slide, but if you're going to put together, if you're going to put together PowerPoint slides to create the actual, trail of your a paper trail of your treason, watch some YouTube videos on how to put together
have an intern do
PowerPoint.
this.
Yes, go on to Canva. You just get a temporary account. They have some templates on there for you. It's really going to help because, as it turns out, font color, font size, font choice just makes a whole lot of difference.
Black text on dark blue background, that doesn't work. It's hard to read.
As is black text on solid white background. It's no, probably shouldn't help the insurrectionists and the treasonous put together better PowerPoint presentations. So we'll take that all back. They have 3 points on their options for January 6th. I'll only mention the third one. The third one is that Vice President Pence delays the decision to certify the electors in order to allow for a vetting and subsequent counting of all the legal paper ballots. Their biggest suggestion is, okay, Mike Pence can't probably say, let's have new electors. Let's declare the states that we think should be contested, which include Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, the states that Trump needed to win and didn't. One option was just to throw those out. They realized you probably can't do that. But here's what they wanted to do, was to delay the certification so they could do a recount of only the paper ballots. Slide number 2 of their 36 that we're going to show you today, of their 36-point slide deck, then has these recommendations. They include this, the fourth and fifth include this: to declare, first of all, is to declare a national emergency. Trump needed to come out, declare a national emergency, and take over the voting, the vote counting nationally. So declare a national emergency, take over all the voting systems, and then declare all electronic voting in all states to have been invalid. So if you voted electronically, rather than a piece of paper where you circled in a dot or pushed out a Chad, but you touched a screen, all of those are invalid. Okay? So throw out all the votes everywhere in the country, no matter what, that are not on paper, and then create a legal and genuine paper ballot count, and only count paper ballots, and then create a constitutional remedy where Congress can decide on the delegates based on only the paper ballots.
Yeah, what is
it is such madness. And this is like delivered days before. This is the kind of stuff that they were working on, plotting, scheming, planning.
Yeah. Let's
National
declare a
emergencies.
national security emergency, which gives the president sweeping powers, and then just declare that a whole bunch of votes don't count.
Because they're electronic.
Talk about voter fraud. Like, you just want to throw out valid votes because you don't like them.
It's just madness. It's just madness. I'll tell you. I mean, this is what's going on, and it's not as if people learned their lesson from this. They're just continuing to find ways to do this in other times and other places. Now, fortunately, all the stopgaps were in place. All the democracy protecting airlocks worked. So these people couldn't pull this off, even when they charged the Capitol, chanting "Hang Mike Pence." All of this. But instead of this all ending and people saying, well, that was close, instead they've just continued it till this day, making these same arguments. Look, if you have friends that believe in Stop the Steal, ask them what they think about paper ballot counting only. They'll be like, well, that's exactly what we should do, because in the conservative worlds, they're now saying only paper ballots. Now, look, there are people who've been arguing for a long time that we think that, like, it seems a little weird that I just touch a screen, and is that going to really keep track of it? Okay, if you have insecurities about touch screens and about other things, for sure we should look at it. But you don't, after the election, say, let's decide how our people voted and then throw those out. And in states where we believe that even more paper ballots would be counted for Joe Biden than for Donald Trump, then we will declare that those paper ballots were fraudulent. Remember hearing about them, like, looking for bamboo strings and stripes in the paper ballots because they thought that Chinese ballots
and just the underlying racism of that conspiracy, like, good grief.
I mean, yes, just this ridiculousness of thinking that the way China would print false ballots that then they shipped over here in shipping containers in the middle of a pandemic and landed inside the boxes in, Florida and Arizona and Texas, which is where they were wanting these recounts to be done, 2 states that Trump won. So it's just bizarro land.
Yeah.
And if all of this was just in the past and we were just poking fun at a bunch of clowns that were bopping around, trying to whip up some crazy kookiness, fine. But that's not what's going on. This
Yeah.
was sent to Mark Meadows, the chief of staff. It was presented to Donald Trump. There were people making this happen. There are lawsuits based on this. So this is really serious, and this is the degree to which our democracy is under attack. It's
And
poorly
so
designed.
many of these insurrectionists that are in court now are saying, like, I was just answering the call. Donald Trump told me to come stop the seal, and that's what I did. I showed up and I did what I thought the president was telling me to do. Like, this goes to the top.
Totally. Look, when you see a black and white with blue header PowerPoint presentation, that's awfully convincing, right? we got a text the other day, and Shelley said, "Hey, I got a text saying that our AT&T bill was paid and we got a little reward. Should I click on this link?" In a text message. I'm like, Nah, I don't think so. I don't think AT&T is going to just like send us a, "Hey, thanks for paying your bill. Click on this link." But it's easy for people to get bamboozled into things. Like, you don't really know. You don't really think someone's going to lie to you about you paying your bill. And like, what is this? Why am I getting something from AT&T? It says from AT&T. This is how fraud works. This is how liars work. They tell you they're one thing and they're another. So people are telling these Trump supporters that this is legitimate constitutional arguments. So people believe it. They wonder about it, or they question it, or they think, I actually have always wondered, like, why do that?
Yeah.
That's not, look, and I will say, an awful lot of Democrats over the last 15, 20 years have laid real heavy on our voting is not fair, is not safe, and is not legitimate. You go all the way back to how people feel that the 2020 election was resolved between Bush and Gore.
Oh, the 2002.
The 2000. What did I say? The 2020?
2000. Yeah.
I don't know what I said 20 years ago. I don't know, whatever, in 2000. That one, people still hung up over that, right? They feel like it was unfair and Bush was an illegitimate president. It happened on local levels. Stacey Abrams became famous for saying, I think that the gubernatorial election she lost was fraudulent. That's the thing. Barbara Boxer, as a senator, signing off in 2004, saying that she didn't want to certify Bush's electoral college. So, somebody, just like happened in January 6th, some congressperson said, I want to challenge the electors. The Congress, or the senator from California, Democratic Senator Barbara Boxer, seconded it. It took about 3 hours for that to all get resolved and then was passed on. Didn't make big news because everyone knew it wasn't going anywhere. But this has been going on, telling people our elections are not honest, safe, fair, and accurate. People throwing around things are rigged, the economy is rigged, the elections are rigged, there's powerful forces that are doing things that you don't know what they're doing. There's a lot of people who believe this.
Yeah, then you throw in whistleblowers, that are saying the government knows that Russia was in our voting systems trying to mess things up. They weren't able to change any votes or whatever, but just the fact that they're meddling around in it is concerning.
Yep. Look, I have a number of friends who say to me, like, look, Trump didn't win that election. Russia went in and changed votes. They're serious as can be. And they don't say it as if, like, hey, I got an inside track on a conspiracy theory here. People, they're just like, no, that's right? Like, that's what happened. Like, that, right? Like, no, that's not what happened. Like, Russia's interference was that they were overextending the use of propaganda to get people in the United States to act in ways, and they were trying to get into our voter systems for all kinds of reasons, but they didn't change votes.
Right.
You think they changed votes? Oh yeah, no, I think they changed votes. So that is around. So I bring all that up to say it's not totally bizarre for someone to think this election didn't go right. Now, it did go right. At some point, a reasonable person has to then just say, I'm going to believe the people who tell me that they know and that it really did go right, or how do you live in the world? But look, had Donald Trump won this election, I could see myself sitting in my basement saying all kinds of things about a fraudulent election that I won't say because Joe Biden won. Like, I could imagine myself losing my bearings and thinking all kinds of things. So
at some point, like,
a little mercy to the people who believe this stuff, especially if Joe Biden came out and said, this was a rigged election.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that Donald Trump and his people and all the Republicans now, save a few, won't come out and say that it was a fair and honest election. It's amazing that more Republicans don't believe that Biden was an illegitimate election. We have a real integrity problem with how people feel about our elections.
Yeah. But yeah, even after all these like Republican-led audits of the election, you know, like in Arizona, they're like, this was fraud through and through. We're taking over. We're taking the ballot boxes. We're going to count them, and didn't find any fraud.
That's right.
Like they have to quietly come out and say, yeah, like, yeah, actually it was fine.
Maybe it was Arizona. I think it was also Wisconsin, where they said, look, the count was not accurate. Joe Biden won more votes here than it was originally declared. Like the number that's going to happen a few, I don't know, it was 15 or 20 votes or something, but like he got more votes. So yeah, you're right that look, that at some points you just have to sort of accept it because it's been structured and audited, unless there was sneaky stuff. Now I will say this, here is what Republicans are actually saying. And then Republican followers are attacking the Capitol for misunderstanding. When Republicans who want to cast doubt on the election, especially I'm speaking of elected officials here, what they're saying is, and they say this in a dishonest way, they say it in a way that obscures the specificity of what they mean to keep people's impressions alive. They say, we think that changing state rules the way they were changed, sometimes by courts, sometimes by governors, to allow for more flexibility, created a context in which it advantaged Joe Biden over Donald Trump. So we think that shifting of political rules around elections, that's what's caused this to be a situation where the election wasn't as everyone thought 3 years ago it was gonna play out, and a lot of decisions were made based on all this. So more voting booths, more time to vote, more ways to vote, mail-in voting being allowed, all of that was just done in a way that really didn't have the, that's not how we should do it. And I feel funny about that. That's what they're saying. I don't know that it was all fair because we made these changes, and those changes advantage the kinds of people who vote for Joe Biden as opposed to the kinds of people who vote for Donald Trump. Right. That's something that they're saying. Mm-hmm. And one could say to themselves, like, had it gone the other way and a bunch of us thought that there were a bunch of Trump voters who were advantaged by changes that were made last minute because of a pandemic, I could hear people that I agree with, and I might even find myself over there wondering, wow, was some of that kaflooey business sort of done just so that there would be this outcome, right? Fair question. Mm-hmm. Totally fair question. But the question has been raised. The question has been answered. And we know that's not true. Mm-hmm. There was no definitive advantage to longer voting times, mail-in voting, more drop boxes. That didn't help one candidate over the other. They've looked at that too. So this idea that like, well, some changes were made and we think they help the other guy. Okay, it's now fair and safe and a decent time to stop thinking that, because that's not what happened. It didn't help the other guy. It helped both of them the same. Now, if Donald Trump chose to say to his voters, don't vote early and don't vote absentee, and lost votes because people didn't want to go out or couldn't, well, that's because he chose to message that way. Right. I mean, he was telling people that this whole thing's fraudulent, you shouldn't participate. So, and then he also got more votes than he got in 2020 or in 2016. He got more votes. So there's no argument you could make to say that things were repressed, that Trump voters were held back, were held down, or any of the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So Republicans keep feeding this by saying like, oh, I'm sure the counting was fair. I'm sure that the system did it accurately. I just think we shouldn't be changing rules in the middle of the game. Okay, well, maybe the next time there's a global pandemic that launches, before 9 months before a campaign, we'll take that into account. So that's part of what is in the mix. Now, here's why that's not what this is only about. because truly Donald Trump was calling the 2020 election fraudulent before it happened.
Right.
If he didn't do it on inauguration day, he did it the next day. He started immediately trying to create the idea that I won this election, but they're going to steal the next one from me. He started saying it instantly and spreading that stuff top to bottom all along. So, and he did it when he lost in Iowa in the caucus to Ted Cruz. He called it a rigged election. He just does this all the time.
Yeah.
He calls elections rigged, even when he's not running, and even when he wins, he still calls them rigged. So this is just the standard presentation point from the guy.
Yeah, it's just like the kid on the playground that anytime he loses, someone cheated. There's no possible way that my kickball team could lose this. It's just so childish. Like I don't understand how people don't see through it. But
okay, well,
there's a whole bunch of other news things, but we should probably save it for.
Didn't even talk about Governor Abbott or about Kamala Harris deciding that the way to deal with or coming out with a presentation on the way we're going to deal with the immigration crisis is going to be to get PepsiCo and others to invest money in Central America.
Yeah. Well, there's
work
always
to do.
Tomorrow. Politics Day. I think we can dig into some of that.
There's always tomorrow, and some given Wednesday or Thursday, we could probably find a tangent carrier to get us into one of these topics. Thanks for being a part of all of this. To all of you, to Nadine and Roger, and Brittany and Janice and all the rest, Carol, Jimmy, all of you that are making comments here, we appreciate it. And if you listen to the podcast, tell a friend, would you? And let us know that you tell a friend, like post it somewhere. Tell people that, you killed a perfectly good hour, as the guys in Car Talk used to say. All right, Dan, anything else for today?
Nope, that's it.
I think I'm out too. So gonna really work hard on using these sound effects.
I don't know what that sound is. Is that crickets? Is it
crickets.
records?
It's cricket. Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, thanks for being a part of this all, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.